I always believed in her. Maybe that was my first mistake, mistaking trust for proof. When she told me she was volunteering at a charity gala that weekend, I didn't think twice. It was her thing. The philanthropy, the big dresses, the polished smiles. That night, as she packed her heels and clipboard into a small suitcase, she kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't slipping through my fingers. The first crack came the next morning. A random text from my friend, Dan, popped up. "Hey man, is this your wife?" Crazy, right? My stomach sank before I even opened the link. TikTok. A video already playing. The yacht unmistakably expensive. Its deck crawling with people whose net worth could probably rival entire countries. And then I saw her. She was laughing, her head tilted back, champagne in hand. She looked so natural there, draped in elegance and excess, like she belonged. The man beside her was no stranger, either. The billionaire whose face had been splashed across magazines a dozen times, his arm brushing hers as he leaned in to whisper something. I stared at the screen, willing it to glitch, to freeze, to stop showing me something I couldn't unsee. But there she was, over and over, in looping betrayal. Charity gala, I whispered to myself. The words sounded foreign now, like a punchline to a cruel joke. My first instinct was to brush it off. Maybe it wasn't her. People look alike. Maybe this video was old. But the nagging in my chest wouldn't let up. The next hour was a blur of searching. Her calendar, her texts, everything she had left behind. For the first time in years, I found myself scrutinizing every little detail, no longer taking her word as gospel. Her phone records were clean, but her calendar had an entry that stuck out: meeting Marina, 7 p.m. Not a charity venue, not a gala hall. The marina. My pulse quickened as pieces of an ugly puzzle began snapping into place. But then the doubt came flooding in. What if I'm wrong? What if this is innocent, and I blow it up into something it's not? It would be easier to believe her story, to let the lie breathe life back into my crumbling world. I fought with myself, wanting the truth but dreading the fallout. By mid-afternoon, anxiety had completely taken hold. I tried calling her, and my heart both sank and soared when it went straight to voicemail. Maybe she was busy at her gala. Maybe she was on that yacht, laughing with a man who wasn't me. Finally, I made the decision that changed everything. I clicked the TikTok link again and paused the video at a specific frame. The shoreline in the background caught my attention, faint but distinct. I recognized it. It was the marina near the cliffs, not far from where she said she'd be for her volunteering. The doubt cracked open. My chest tightened as the pieces slammed together. The gala, the billionaire, the marina. It wasn't a coincidence. I spent hours pacing the living room, swinging between fury and heartbreak. Memories of us together kept surfacing, mocking me. Her laugh in the video wasn't just betrayal. It was a cruel reminder of the woman I thought I knew. The final blow came when I noticed something subtle but damning in the video. A bracelet on her wrist, a gift I'd given her on our anniversary. She swore she'd never take it off. And there it was, glinting on her arm, as she raised her glass to toast whatever deceitful moment had brought her there. The truth was undeniable now. She was lying, and the life we'd built together felt like it was caving in. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit at home and let her deception fester in silence. I grabbed my jacket and keys, my mind racing as I formulated my plan. The night air was sharp as I headed toward the marina. My heart thundered in my chest, not just from anger, but from the fear of what I might find. What if I was wrong? What if I was right? As the shoreline came into view, so did the faint glow of the yacht in the distance. Its lights twinkled like stars, mocking me from afar. I slowed the car and stepped out, the sound of waves crashing faintly in the background. My fists clenched as I stared out at the vessel that held the truth and her lies. I wasn't ready to confront it, but I knew I had no choice. The realization hit me in waves, each one crashing harder than the last. At first, I clung to denial. People make mistakes, right? A video like that could be doctored, or maybe it was an old clip. Maybe she was working. But the lie was unraveling faster than I could stitch it back together. I stood in our bedroom, staring at her side of the closet. Her shoes were lined up neatly, a perfect little row of heels she never wore around me. The dress she'd left in, a sleek black gown, was missing, but her casual outfits hung undisturbed. It was a stark, screaming absence, the kind you feel in your chest when you know something precious is gone for good. Still, part of me couldn't let go. My hands trembled as I unlocked her laptop. She never hid her passwords. She didn't need to. I'd never given her a reason to. Her email inbox was a mundane mix of newsletters, work updates, and the occasional forwarded joke from friends. But when I scrolled to the sent folder, something caught my eye, a message labeled meeting reminder. It was addressed to a single recipient, the billionaire himself. The message was short. No context, no pleasantries. Just a time and a location, 7 p.m., Marina. My chest tightened, and my breath came out in short, ragged gasps. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. I slammed the laptop shut and paced the room, running my hands through my hair. What now? I felt like a caged animal, desperate to act but terrified of what I might unleash. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the house was shrouded in the kind of silence that made every sound feel intrusive. I leaned against the window frame, staring out into the dark, my reflection faint and ghostly against the glass. It was then that I noticed something on her nightstand, a small slip of paper peeking out from under a book. I crossed the room and picked it up. A receipt from a boutique jewelry store. The date was just 2 days ago, and the item purchased wasn't listed, only the amount. 4 figures. I dropped the receipt like it had burned me. Jewelry? She hadn't mentioned anything new. There was no anniversary, no occasion. My pulse quickened as I pieced it together. A gift for someone else? The final blow came when I opened the closet again, desperate for answers I couldn't articulate. Her travel bag sat in the corner, partially unzipped, revealing a glint of metallic silver inside. I crouched down and pulled it open, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. Inside was an embossed invitation, the kind you'd expect for an exclusive event. The name of the billionaire's yacht, Elysium, was printed in gold letters. Below it, the words "private event" gleamed in mockery. The room seemed to spin. My knees hit the floor as I clutched the invitation, my mind racing. She's not just cheating. She's flaunting it. And yet, amid the pain, there was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I stood, gripping the invitation like it was my lifeline. My heart ached with betrayal, but anger was starting to burn through the fog. She thought she could get away with it, that I'd never question her charity alibi. I wasn't just going to sit here and let it happen. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mike. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy. "What's up, man? Kind of late." "I need your boat," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. There was a pause. "What for?" "Just trust me," I said, my tone softening. "I'll explain later." The night air was biting as I arrived at the marina. Mike's fishing boat bobbed gently in the water, a far cry from the sleek luxury vessel docked further out. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about matching their extravagance. It was about showing up. I climbed aboard and started the engine, the low rumble echoing through the stillness. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, my knuckles white with tension. The Elysium was visible in the distance, glowing like a beacon of arrogance. As I approached, the sound of music drifted across the water, faint but growing louder with every wave. The yacht was alive with laughter and light, the kind of decadence that felt a world away from the life we'd shared. My chest tightened, but I pushed forward. I wasn't sure what I'd do once I got there, but I knew one thing. I wasn't leaving until she saw me, until I shattered whatever fantasy she thought she could hide in. The Elysium loomed closer, its lights casting shimmering reflections on the water. I cut the engine, letting the boat glide silently the rest of the way. My heart pounded, my breath shallow, as I reached for the ladder at the back of the yacht. As I climbed, a voice in the back of my mind whispered, "This is it. There's no turning back now." I sat on Mike's boat, the hum of the engine still faintly reverberating through the floor beneath me. The cold air stung my face, but it wasn't enough to snap me out of the haze. My hands gripped the steering wheel, and my eyes remained fixed on the glowing silhouette of the Elysium in the distance. What are you going to do when you get there? The thought gnawed at me, dragging me back into the pit of my own indecision. I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted to scream in her face, to demand answers in front of whoever was listening. Another part, a quieter, more dangerous part, wanted to wait, to watch, to let her expose herself further. But there was no turning back. Not now. The first step was preparation. I grabbed my phone, replaying the TikTok again. Each time I paused the video, new details leapt out at me. The angle of her head as she laughed. The way the billionaire's hand rested briefly on her lower back. It wasn't just casual. It was intimate. I scrolled through her social media next, something I'd avoided before because it felt too invasive. But now, with everything laid bare, I had nothing left to lose. Her posts were perfect, carefully curated snapshots of a life that didn't exist. A selfie in her charity gala dress, posted that morning, with a caption about making a difference. My stomach churned. That same dress was in the video on the Elysium. And then, buried deep in the comments, a single line stood out like a neon sign. Love the dress. Same as the one from the gala on the yacht, right? Someone had noticed. Someone knew. I stared at the comment, my mind racing. If strangers could connect the dots, how many more people would see the truth? A part of me wanted to let them, to watch her house of lies burn down without lifting a finger. But that wasn't enough. I needed to be the one to light the match. The next stage was reconnaissance. I steered the boat closer to the Elysium, keeping low as I cut the engine and let the current carry me in. The music grew louder, a mix of bass and laughter that grated against my nerves. As I approached, I could make out figures moving on the deck. She was there, near the bar, the billionaire by her side. They looked comfortable, too comfortable. I clenched my fists as I crouched down, peering through the shadows. And that's when I saw it. A second yacht, smaller but no less luxurious, was docked just beyond the Elysium. Its deck was empty, but something about it caught my eye. Its name, Perseverance, was painted in bold letters across the hull. That's when I remembered the jewelry receipt. The store wasn't far from here. Was the gift meant for someone else? Or, I felt sick. What if this wasn't just an affair? What if it was more? The pieces were shifting, rearranging themselves into something I hadn't prepared for. This wasn't a simple betrayal. It was calculated. The emotional climax hit like a rogue wave. I gripped the side of the boat, my breath shallow as realization set in. She hadn't just cheated. She'd planned it. The past few months flickered through my mind like a movie reel. The late nights, the unexplained trips, the sudden need for privacy. How had I been so blind? My resolve hardened. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing her for who she really was. I grabbed the rope and tied Mike's boat to the back of the Elysium, the knots clumsy but firm. The yacht loomed above me, a glowing fortress of wealth and deceit. The sound of glasses clinking reached my ears, followed by her laughter. That laugh, light, effortless, as if nothing in the world could touch her. I climbed the ladder slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't hesitate. As I reached the deck, the world around me sharpened. The lights were blinding, the music deafening, but all I could focus on was her. She hadn't seen me yet. She was too busy, her back turned, her attention fully on the billionaire. And then, in a single, searing moment, she turned. Her eyes met mine, widening in shock. I stepped forward, my voice low but cutting through the noise like a knife. I hope you're enjoying your charity gala. Her face drained of color. The billionaire turned, confused, his gaze shifting between us. The room seemed to freeze, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. The confrontation had begun, and I wasn't leaving until I had answers. Her face was a portrait of shock, the kind you can't fake. For a second, I thought she might faint, but then her mask slipped into place, a calm, almost detached expression that made my stomach turn. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice low, cutting through the music. She stepped forward, careful, deliberate, like she was approaching a stray dog that might bite. "I think the better question," I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort, is why are you here? Because this doesn't look like a charity gala to me. Behind her, the billionaire watched us with an arched brow, curiosity written all over his smug face. He didn't speak, didn't intervene, just stood there like he was enjoying the show. Can we talk privately? She said, her eyes darting around at the gathering crowd. Phones were out now, recording every second of our messy, unscripted reunion. No, I snapped, louder than I intended. We're doing this here. You want to humiliate me? Fine, but I'm not letting you slink off to spin more lies. Her lips tightened, and for the first time, I saw something raw flicker across her face. Was it fear? Guilt? Or just anger at being caught? Let's talk, she said through gritted teeth, her voice losing the soft edge she perfected over the years. Not here. Please. I followed her reluctantly as she led me to a quieter corner of the yacht, away from prying eyes and phones. Every step felt like walking into quicksand, and I hated myself for still wanting an explanation. She turned to face me, her arms crossed defensively. It's not what you think, she started. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and foreign. Don't insult me. I saw the video. I saw the receipts. And I'm standing on his yacht. So, go ahead. Tell me what it really is. She opened her mouth, then closed it, as if weighing her options. It's complicated, she finally said, her voice faltering. You're sleeping with him, I said, the words tasting like poison on my tongue. She flinched but didn't deny it. Her silence was confirmation, but there was more. There had to be. I pressed on. How long? I demanded. Her gaze flickered away. A few months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I refused to let her see the full weight of my pain. Months, I repeated, the word echoing like a death knell. While I've been at home, trusting you, loving you. And you've been, what? Playing house with a billionaire? She shook her head quickly. It's not like that, she said, her voice rising. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. Don't give me that, I snapped, my anger surging again. People don't just trip and fall into affairs. You planned this. The trips, the receipts. Hell, you even lied about a charity gala. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead, she dropped her head into her hands. You don't understand, she muttered. Then make me understand, I said coldly. When she looked up, her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. It's not just about us, she said. There are things you don't know. Things I couldn't tell you. Try me, I said, though my resolve was cracking under the weight of her words. She hesitated, then glanced back toward the deck where the billionaire still lingered. Her silence was answer enough. Whatever was going on, it wasn't just infidelity. Her half-truths and evasions churned in my mind as I stormed back toward the main deck. I didn't know what her game was, but I was done being a spectator. If she wouldn't give me the full story, I'd find it myself. The billionaire was still there, chatting amiably with his guests, as if my arrival had been nothing more than a minor disturbance. His confidence made my blood boil, but it also gave me an idea. As I passed a small table, I grabbed a flute of champagne and a sleek black napkin embossed with the yacht's name. Both items seemed insignificant, but I knew better. Evidence. Every detail counted. I didn't stop to think about how reckless I was being as I pulled out my phone and snapped pictures of the napkin, the yacht, and the guest list I found casually left on a side table. Names, faces, and connections. Each one could lead to the truth. When I returned to the boat I'd borrowed, I was buzzing with adrenaline. My wife's lies were no longer my only target. Whatever this was, an affair, a business deal, something more, I was going to uncover every piece of it. As the engine roared to life and I turned the boat away from the glowing monstrosity of the Elysium, one thought burned in my mind. She's not just cheating. She's hiding something, and I'm going to find out what. The night swallowed me whole as I drifted away from the Elysium. The yacht's lights receded into the distance, but they left an afterimage in my mind, bright and unrelenting. My grip on the wheel was tight, knuckles white, as the waves carried me forward. Inside, though, I was motionless, paralyzed. Her voice echoed in my head. You don't understand. There are things I couldn't tell you. Those words repeated over and over, tangling with every memory I had of her. Every promise, every whispered, "I love you," that now felt as hollow as an empty shell. I tried to cling to anger. Anger was easy, even comforting in its way. But beneath it, something heavier churned. Disappointment, not just in her, but in myself. For believing her. For letting it come to this. I docked the boat at Mike's slip, the creak of the wood beneath my feet the only sound in the stillness. I sat down on the edge of the pier, staring at the water. Its surface rippled in the moonlight, calm and indifferent, mocking the storm raging inside me. How did we get here? The question felt too big to answer. I replayed everything in my mind. The receipts, the texts, the TikTok. Each new detail only added weight to the pile pressing down on my chest. And then there were the good memories, the ones I didn't want to think about but couldn't stop. Our wedding day. Lazy Sundays on the couch. Her smile when she thought no one was watching. I felt my throat tighten, and before I knew it, I was crying. Not sobbing, not breaking down. Just silent tears I didn't even bother to wipe away. I hated her for what she'd done. But I hated myself more for still loving the version of her I thought was real. The sound of footsteps startled me. I turned to see Mike approaching, his face a mix of concern and curiosity. "You look like hell," he said, sitting down beside me. I didn't respond right away. It felt too raw, too fresh, to explain everything. But Mike had always been patient, and eventually, the words started to come. I told him about the TikTok, the yacht, the confrontation. He listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with every detail. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "That's rough," he said. "That's putting it mildly," I muttered. For a while, we sat in silence. Then he said something that hit me like a slap. "So what are you going to do about it?" I turned to him, anger flaring. "What do you mean? I already did something." I confronted her. "Yeah," he said unfazed. "And now what? You just sit here, letting her win? Letting her get away with it?" His words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I had acted on impulse, storming onto that yacht, but I hadn't thought beyond that. I'd been reacting, not strategizing. I stared at the water again, Mike's words settling over me like a second skin. "I don't know what to do," I admitted finally. "I don't even know what I want." "Figure it out," he said simply. "But whatever you decide, don't half-ass it. You've got evidence, right? Use it. Expose her. Or, hell, walk away and let her drown in her own mess. But make a choice. Don't let her keep you in limbo." I nodded, the weight of his advice sinking in. Limbo, that's exactly where I was. Caught between love and hate, action and inaction. And then it hit me. I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself for not taking control sooner, for letting her lies dictate my life. I stood up, my resolve hardening. "You're right," I said, surprising both of us. Mike raised an eyebrow. "What's the plan?" I didn't have all the details yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. "First, I'm going to find out exactly what she's hiding," I said. "And then, I'll decide if she's worth burning down." The drive home was quiet, the world outside my windshield bathed in moonlight. My mind raced, but for the first time in days, the chaos inside me felt focused. As I pulled into the driveway, the sight of our house, a place that had once felt safe, warm, ours, stung. It was just a facade now, like her. But facades crack. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door. I wasn't just her husband anymore. I was the man who would uncover every piece of this puzzle, no matter how painful it was to see the full picture. And as I stepped inside, one thought burned in my mind. The truth is mine now, not hers, and I'm going to use it. The house was quiet when I walked in, but not empty. I could feel her presence, like a storm waiting to break. Her shoes were by the door, those same heels from the TikTok video, and her coat hung neatly on the rack. I found her in the kitchen, sipping a glass of red wine like it was any other evening. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "You're home late," she said, her tone casual, as if she hadn't spent the weekend lying on a billionaire's yacht. "I could say the same to you," I shot back. Her hand paused midair, the glass hovering near her lips. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what it means, I said, stepping closer. My voice was low, controlled, but my heart was pounding. You lied to me. About the gala. About everything. Her expression hardened. She set the glass down with a sharp clink. I told you, it's not what you think. Then explain it to me, I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair. Her eyes narrowed. It's not an affair, she said defensively. I laughed bitterly. That's a funny way of describing sneaking off to a billionaire's yacht while telling me you're working at a charity event. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Don't, I said. Don't even try to gaslight me. I've seen the videos, the receipts, the invitation. I know where you were. I know who you were with. Her composure cracked for a split second, her lips parting in shock before she recovered. You don't understand? Then make me understand. I yelled, my voice echoing through the kitchen. She flinched but stood her ground. It's complicated, she said again, her voice trembling. Complicated? I snapped. You know what's complicated? Watching your wife lie to your face, knowing she's been living a double life. For a moment, the silence between us was deafening. And then she said something that stopped me cold. You have no idea what I'm protecting you from. The words hung in the air, thick with implication. I stared at her, my anger colliding with confusion. Protecting me? I repeated. Her gaze faltered, and she turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. I didn't want you involved in this, she said quietly. Involved in what? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her wine, downing the rest of the glass in one long gulp. When she finally looked at me again, her eyes were unreadable. You think this is just about me and him, she said. But it's not. It's bigger than that. Bigger than what? I pressed. What the hell are you talking about? She shook her head. I can't tell you. Then I'll find out myself, I said, my voice firm. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear. Don't, she said, stepping toward me. Please, just leave it alone. Why? I challenged. What are you so afraid of me finding out? She hesitated, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. Then she said, because it could ruin everything. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. There was more to this than an affair. But if she thought her cryptic warnings were enough to stop me, she didn't know me at all. I turned on my heel and started toward the door. Where are you going? She called after me, her voice tinged with desperation. To do what you won't, I said without looking back. I grabbed my jacket and keys, my mind already racing. Whatever she was hiding, I was going to uncover it. And if she was afraid of the fallout, maybe she should have thought about that before dragging me into her mess. As I drove away from the house, my phone buzzed on the seat beside me. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer. Hello? A man's voice came through the line, low and deliberate. You don't know me, but I know about your wife, he said. My blood ran cold. Meet me at the docks, he continued. We need to talk. The line went dead, leaving me gripping the wheel with shaking hands. What have you gotten yourself into, Laura? I thought. And more importantly, what am I walking into? The phone call played over and over in my mind as I parked near the docks. The voice was calm, calculated, and unervingly sure of itself. We need to talk. Who was this man? How did he know about Laura? And why now? I sat in the car for a moment, staring out at the water, the sound of waves lapping against the wooden pier grounding me just enough to take a breath. My heart was racing, a mix of anger, dread, and something sharper. Hope, maybe. Hope that this would finally break the stalemate I'd been living in since that TikTok shattered my world. But hope was dangerous. I gripped the steering wheel, closing my eyes. Every part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to let this man's cryptic warnings become someone else's problem. But I couldn't. Laura's words in the kitchen had rattled me. It's bigger than you think. Bigger than what? An affair? A betrayal? How much of my life had been a lie? And how far did this web stretch? I opened my eyes and glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My jaw was set, my eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. I was tired of being a bystander in my own life. With a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The docks were eerily quiet, the glow of a few distant streetlights casting long shadows over the weathered planks. I walked slowly, scanning the area, my shoes echoing with each step. A figure emerged from the shadows near one of the boats. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, his face partially obscured by the brim of a hat. He didn't move as I approached, just stood there, watching. "You're the one who called me?" I asked, stopping a few feet away. He nodded. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure if you would." "Who are you?" I demanded, crossing my arms. "And what do you know about my wife?" He hesitated, then gestured toward a nearby bench. "Let's sit." "I'm fine standing." The man chuckled softly. "Suit yourself." He glanced around before speaking again, his voice low. "Your wife, she's in deep with some dangerous people. More dangerous than you realize." "Start making sense," I snapped. He reached into his coat, and I tensed, half expecting a weapon. But instead, he pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to me. "Take a look," he said. I hesitated, then ripped the envelope open. Inside were photos, grainy but clear enough to recognize Laura. She was sitting across from the billionaire in a dimly lit restaurant, their heads bent close together. Beside them was a man I didn't recognize, his face sharp and menacing, his eyes cold even in the still image. "Who's this?" I asked, pointing to the stranger. The man's expression darkened. "He's a fixer, a problem solver for people who don't want their dirt getting out." "And Laura?" My voice wavered. "She's not just having an affair," he said. "She's part of something bigger. Deals, favors, secrets. And if you keep pushing, you might find yourself caught in the crossfire." I stared at the photos, my stomach churning. This wasn't just betrayal. It was danger, the kind that could ripple far beyond my marriage. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know what you're up against," he said. "And because if you don't stop now, they'll come for you next." I clenched my fists, the weight of his words pressing down on me. But instead of fear, I felt something else rising to the surface: determination. "If you think I'm just going to back down, you don't know me," I said, my voice steady. "Whatever she's hiding, I'll find it. And if these people come after me, they'll regret it." The man sighed, shaking his head. "I figured you'd say that. Just be careful." He turned to leave but paused. "One last thing. Follow the money. That's where the real answers are." I watched him disappear into the night, his warning hanging heavy in the air. As I walked back to my car, the photos clutched tightly in my hand. A new resolve took root. Laura wasn't just lying to me. She was tangled in something far darker, something that could destroy both of us if I wasn't careful. But careful wasn't enough anymore. I needed to be smart, ruthless. And if following the money was the key, then that's exactly what I'd do. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, one thought burned in my mind. No more running. No more waiting. This time, I'm coming for the truth. I stared at the photos spread out across the passenger seat, the cold truth etched into every grainy image. Laura wasn't just disloyal. She was complicit in something far bigger. The fixer's sharp eyes seemed to bore into me even from the still frame, his presence a silent warning of the storm I was walking into. But it didn't matter. Whatever she'd gotten herself into, I couldn't let it go unchecked. I couldn't let her lies define my life anymore. The house was dark when I got home, but the glow of the living room lamp spilled into the hallway. Laura was waiting for me, perched on the couch with a glass of wine in her hand. Her expression was calm, almost calculated, but her fingers tapped against the stem of the glass. A small tell I'd learned to read long ago. "You've been gone a while," she said, her voice steady. "Where did you go?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I set my keys down deliberately on the counter and stepped into the room. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed cold and even. "We need to talk." She arched a brow, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. "About what?" "About this," I said, tossing the photos onto the coffee table. Her face paled as she leaned forward, her eyes scanning the images. Her hand froze mid-reach for the wine glass, and when she looked up at me, her mask was cracking. "Where did you get these?" she demanded, her voice low and sharp. "Not the point," I said, crossing my arms. "The point is you lied to me, Laura, about everything. And now I want the truth." Her jaw tightened, and she pushed the photos away as if their existence alone offended her. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, her tone clipped. "You're playing with fire." "Then enlighten me," I said, stepping closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're tangled up with some very dangerous people." "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, her voice rising. "Don't I?" I shot back, my anger finally breaking through. "I know about the fixer. I know about the meetings, the dinners, the money. You think you're protecting me by keeping me in the dark? All you're doing is dragging me into your mess without giving me a chance to fight back." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "It's not about you," she said quietly. "Then what is it about, Laura? Him? The billionaire? The fixer?" I leaned in, my voice a whisper now. "Or is it about you? Your greed, your ambition?" "Stop," she said, her voice cracking. "Just stop." The silence between us was suffocating. Her gaze locked on the table as if the photos might disappear if she ignored them hard enough. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want this," she said. "Any of it." "But you chose it," I said, the bitterness in my voice cutting like glass. "And now you're going to tell me why." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "The money," she admitted. "It started with the money. We were struggling more than you realized. I thought I could fix it. By selling yourself out to a billionaire?" I said, my words dripping with disgust. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," she said, her voice rising defensively. "It was just supposed to be a deal, a one-time thing. But then he brought him into it, the fixer, and everything changed." "How?" I demanded. She shook her head. "You don't understand. They don't let you walk away. Once you're in, you're in." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't let it show. "You're scared," I said, my voice softening despite myself. "But you still made this choice, Laura, and now you've dragged me into it." She met my gaze then, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, desperation. "You have to let this go," she said. "Please. If you keep digging, they'll come for you." I stared at her, my mind racing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. But as much as her fear rattled me, I couldn't back down now. "I can't let it go," I said firmly. "Not after everything you've done. I need to know the truth. All of it." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "And if you won't give it to me, I'll find it myself." I grabbed the photos and walked out of the room, her voice calling after me, but I didn't stop. As I closed the door to my office and spread the photos across the desk, my hands shook, not with fear, but with resolve. "Follow the money," the man at the docks had said. I opened my laptop and began tracing every account, every transaction, every thread of her lies. Whatever Laura was hiding, I was going to uncover it. And if she thought she could scare me into silence, she was wrong. The game has changed now, I thought, staring at the glowing screen. And I'm ready to play. The photos, the receipts, the countless lies. They were all laid out before me like a forensic map of our broken life. Each piece of evidence told its own story, but together, they screamed one undeniable truth. The woman I'd loved no longer existed, or maybe she never had. As I sat in the dim glow of my office lamp, staring at the chaotic timeline I'd constructed on the wall, a strange calm settled over me. The anger, the betrayal, the obsessive need for answers, they'd all burned hot and bright, consuming me. But now, in the ashes, something steadier remained. Clarity. I didn't need all the answers. Not anymore. Laura's lies had been a weight I carried for too long, dragging me down into a darkness I barely recognized. But somewhere in the wreckage, I'd started to see myself again. Not the man she tried to deceive, but the man I wanted to be. Her choices weren't mine to bear. Whatever debts she owed, whatever dangers she feared, they were hers alone. I'd spent too long believing I could fix us, that I could bring her back to who she was before. But there was no going back. It was time to let go. When I walked into the living room, she was waiting for me, her posture stiff, her face drawn. She must have sensed something had shifted. Her eyes darted to my hands, empty now, no evidence, no demands. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" she asked cautiously, her voice cracking slightly. I nodded, meeting her gaze with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. "I have." Her lips parted, a flicker of hope or fear crossing her face. I couldn't tell which. "I'm done," I said simply. Her brow furrowed. "Done? What do you mean?" "I mean I'm not fighting this anymore," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not fighting you anymore." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real panic in them. "You can't just—" "Yes, I can," I interrupted. "You made your choices, Laura, and now I'm making mine." I stepped closer, the weight of my words filling the room. "You wanted to keep me in the dark, to protect me or control me. I don't even care which anymore. But I'm done living in your shadow." She looked away, her hands clenching into fists. "You don't understand what they'll do." "I don't care," I said, cutting her off again. "This isn't about them. It's about us. Or what's left of us." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us before adding, "And the truth is, there's nothing left." Her head snapped up, tears brimming in her eyes. "Don't do this," she whispered. "We can fix it. I'll tell you everything. Just give me one more chance." I shook my head, my resolve unshaken. "You had your chances, Laura. This isn't about fixing things anymore. It's about moving on." Her tears finally spilled over, but I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked to the door, my hand resting on the frame for a moment as I looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Laura," I said softly before stepping outside. The air outside was cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of rain. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, feeling the weight of the house, the lies, the betrayal finally lift off my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could face it on my own terms. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Mike. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I think I'm finally ready." "For what?" I smiled faintly, the corners of my lips lifting for the first time in weeks. "To start over." As I hung up, I looked up at the night sky. The clouds had parted, revealing a sliver of stars twinkling above. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A small light in the darkness, a reminder that even the heaviest storms pass. With one last glance at the house behind me, I turned and walked toward my car, each step lighter than the last. The past was hers, I thought as I slid into the driver's seat. But the future? The future is mine. The sunrise painted the sky in hues of gold and pink as I stood at the edge of the marina, the water still and glassy like a mirror. I watched my reflection ripple with each faint movement of the tide. It didn't feel like the same face I'd seen weeks ago, the man consumed by betrayal and self-doubt. I had scars now, invisible but deep, each one a testament to the pain I'd endured. But as I stared into the water, I realized those scars didn't define me. They shaped me, sure, but they weren't all I was. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of grief, anger, and uncertainty, but they'd also stripped away the illusions I'd been clinging to. Laura's betrayal had left me shattered, but in the cracks, I'd found pieces of myself I thought were lost. I'd learned how to fight for the truth, even when it hurt. I'd learned how to let go, even when it felt like holding on was safer. Most of all, I'd learned that love, no matter how deep or beautiful it seems, can't survive without honesty. And I deserved honesty, something I hadn't been given in years. The small fishing boat bobbed gently beside me, the one I'd borrowed from Mike the night I crashed the Elysium. I stepped aboard, running my hand along the worn railing. It wasn't much to look at, but it had carried me through one of the most defining moments of my life. In my hand was a box. Inside were the last remnants of Laura's lies, the photos, the receipts, the invitation. Everything I'd clung to in my search for answers. They'd been my evidence, my weapon, my anchor. But now, they were just weight. With a deep breath, I opened the box and tipped it over the side. The papers floated for a moment before sinking, disappearing into the dark water below. I watched them go, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. It wasn't about erasing the past. It would always be part of me. But I didn't need it to define me anymore. "Goodbye, Laura," I whispered, the words carried away by the breeze. As the sun climbed higher, I turned my gaze to the horizon. It stretched out before me, endless and inviting, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. I climbed back onto the dock and pulled out my phone, scrolling through the saved contacts until I found Mike's name. "You still looking for someone to help with those weekend charters?" I asked when he answered. "Always," he replied. "You thinking about joining me?" "Yeah," I said, a smile breaking across my face. "I think I need to spend more time on the water." "Good choice," he said. "We'll talk details later." As I hung up, a sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't about the job, not really. It was about reclaiming my life, finding something new, something that was mine alone. I stood there for a while longer, the marina waking up around me. Seagulls cried overhead, and the faint smell of salt filled the air. The future wasn't clear, but that didn't scare me anymore. The scars of the past would heal, and in their place, I'd build something stronger, something honest. I took one last look at the water, its surface glittering like 1,000 tiny stars. Then I turned and walked away, each step carrying me closer to a new chapter. The past was a part of me, but the future was waiting. And for the first time, I was ready.